Cairo, north of the Sahara, east of Suez, a facade of pleasure-seeking hides the diabolic machinations that catapult Audie into the international power play for control of the Far East.
You mean to say that my father's working for the Egyptian army?
As if you didn't know.
George Sanders, a Machiavellian mastermind of science.
The 20th century is the century of nuclear physics. This is a race, my dear. America's competing with Russia, Russia with China, and Egypt with Israel. And this is a race that I've got to win.
In this world, both life and love are pawns to those seeking the secrets hidden in the trunk to Cairo.
Professor Schlieben, why don't you come with me?
You kidnapped my daughter, and now you want me to come with you? You must be out of your mind.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to listen to this episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And this week we're talking about Trunk to Cairo from 1966.
Trunk to Cairo was directed by Menahem Golan, written by Marc Behm, Alexander Ramati, and Artur Brauner, produced by Menahem Golan and Michael J. Kagan for Central Cinema Company film Noah Films.
Trunk to Cairo stars Audie as Merrick, Mike Merrick, George Sanders as Professor Schlieben, Marianne Koch as Helga Schlieben, Hans van Borsody as Hans Klugg, Joseph Yadin as Captain Gabar, Gila Almagor as Yasmin, Eytan Priver as Jamil, Bomba Zur as Ali, Zeev Berlinsky as Benz, Shlomo Vyshinsky as Jacob,
Tikva Mor as Christina, Elana Edith as Hadassah, Mona Silberstein as Hostess, Yoel Neumann as Egyptian Colonel, Anna Schell as Belly Dancer, Susanna Rotoni as Fräulein Bruckner, and Menashe Glazer as Mahmoud.
Trunk to Cairo opens, as most movies do, with some credits. They're rolling over an Egyptian city scene. We see a Volkswagen Beetle driving out to the beach with three people, one of them doing something quite dangerous, standing up through the sunroof with their arms outstretched.
When the Volkswagen arrives at the beach, the three people exit the car.
Sounds more like 10 people, but it's only three.
The girl who was hanging out of the car the whole ride there grabs a beach ball and kicks it towards the surf, and she follows it into the water. The other couple are getting ready for their day at the beach, and the fella is busy opening the cooler. When he finally gets it open, it explodes.
Oh no.
The girl who was in the water runs back up from the water and screams.
And a title card comes up, and we get a few more credits. Under the credits, a group of Arabic men are looking over the charred husk of the Volkswagen. Then we cut to an airplane in flight. Inside, a man with a distinct Texas accent asks for a German paper from the flight attendant. Across the aisle, when it's her turn, a woman asks for that paper too. The flight attendant still should have to go look because that man took the last one.
The man offers her his newspaper, but says he's going to keep the sports page because she wouldn't have any interest in that.
Wrong.
But she does. She wants to know the results of the Munich-Cologne game. The man looks and tells her Cologne won 3-1, and then he gives her the sports page as well and heads back to his seat.
She's kind of bummed by that news. A little bit later, we see them. He's moved up one row so that he's now directly across from her. She comments on his alcohol intake. He says he's on an expense account and invites her to join him, but she declines. And then he moves in for the kill, going across the aisle to sit in an empty seat next to her.
He does ask her if she minds, and she doesn't. And he introduces himself as Ludwig Bauer. And she introduces herself as Helga Schlieben, and the man recognizes that name. He asks her if she's related to Professor Schlieben, the scientist, and he's her father. She asks if he's going to work for her father at the university, and he says, "Oh, is that where he's working?" And she replies that that's what she was told.
She may be wrong about that. Helga points out an article in the paper that's troubling her. Yesterday, a German scientist was killed. And Ludwig points out that a lot of Germans have met similar misfortunes lately. Helga agrees, but she doesn't know why. Bauer hints that we have a few million enemies in the Mideast. She doesn't know about that. He says there's a lot she doesn't know.
Finally, the plane lands. Ludwig is picking up his bags at Claim, and Helga sees him and asks if he's looking for someone, and he says he was trying to avoid looking at her.
They flirt a bit. Helga actually comes between him and his luggage cart. And then someone arrives. It's Hans. He's there to collect Helga, and they seem to be boyfriend and girlfriend, as she runs over to him and kisses him.
He says he's come to pick her up because her father was in a meeting and wasn't able to make it. Then Helga introduces Ludwig to Hans. Hans says hello and then proceeds to forget all about him. Helga asks if they might give Ludwig a ride to Cairo. Hans says they're not going into the city. Ludwig says that's fine. He can take the bus and thanks anyway. Before he goes, Helga tells him that she'll be calling him.
This is probably something we should have brought up earlier, but in this movie, there are at least two characters that go by two different names. And what we're going to do is call them the name that they are known by in the scene, whether we know what their real name is or not. Now we're outside the airport, and a bus arrives. Ludwig boards it. We also see out there a man in sunglasses and a fez milling about. We'll see him again later. We take a journey through some non-touristy parts of Cairo, and then later a bellhop shows Ludwig to his hotel room. He gives the boy a tip and looks around his room. On the mirror, someone has written German, go ohm, with red lipstick. Ludwig corrects the spelling of the threat message and is satisfied with his work.
Later outside, we see Ludwig reading from a small piece of paper. He looks up to see a record store and goes inside.
There we see the man with the fez again.
He's with a customer and tells Ludwig that he'll be with him in a moment. Then when it's Ludwig's turn, he tells the shopkeeper that he doesn't know what he's looking for, something local he suspects.
But even based on that non-helpful description, the man has a record for him. Ludwig asks if he can play it here, and the man in the fez directs him to a confessional/listening booth.
Ludwig goes in, and the shopkeeper starts whistling I Could Have Danced All Night from West Side Story. Not really, but it's close.
Bauer puts his record on the turntable, and while local music indeed starts playing, it's soon overtaken by the voice of a woman. It sounds like she has a Middle Eastern accent of some kind, but she's speaking English. She says, "Sorry we cannot meet for security reasons. The man who hired you is in Egypt. He will take you to Professor Schlieben, who is in charge of the secret operation. Now, first find out all you can about this operation. 2, someone is killing Germans using Israel as a cover. Find out who they are. The minute you have information, come here to record your report, and it will be transmitted to Tel Aviv. Good luck."
At that, Ludwig removes his headphones and returns to his hotel. He goes back to his bathroom mirror, where the words Germans die ear are written, and again he picks up the lipstick and fixes it. But we see that the curtain in the bedroom is moving, and it looks like someone might be behind it. And indeed there is, because this someone peeks his head out and exposes himself to us. Well, exposes his head to us.
Well, what he does do is flip open his switchblade. Bauer comes from out of the bathroom into the bedroom, and the intruder whips his blade at him. But it only sticks in the wood of the doorframe. Then the two spar a little, and Bauer is easily overmatched. The man throws him onto the bed and starts suffocating him with a pillow. And he probably would have succeeded if the attack wasn't interrupted.
It's interrupted by the sound of knocking at the door, so the stranger flees through the bathroom. The door opens, and Captain Gabar enters. He runs up to Bauer and revives him. Bauer asks where he came from, and Gabar says it's a good thing he did, and that he sees that he had a visitor.
Yes, where he came from, and then the answer is it's a good thing I did.
Gabar tells Bauer that it's a good thing he sat by, because he sees that he had a visitor, and Bauer says yes, but he didn't get a good look at him. And he needs a drink. Luckily, Captain Gabar knows just the place for that.
We take another brief journey through Cairo. This time it's the evening, and we see all the hot spots in Cairo as they go along. They arrive at a basement club. They're clopping like horses as they go down the stone steps, and they're followed by 2 men who walk a little more quietly.
Not too quietly. Everybody seems to be wearing tap shoes.
We go into the club, and a chanteuse is singing Dangerous Woman as they enter. And this seems to be a pointed warning for Bauer and Gabar.
So it seems that Gabar is the one who hired Bauer, and they're discussing this. Bauer asks who's trying to scare the Germans, and Gabar says the Israelis, he supposes. Gabar asks Bauer if he's frightened of the Israelis, and if he still wants to stay. Bauer says that depends. Is Gabar still going to pay?
While they're talking, we see above them, at street level, a man aiming something through the window behind them. It looks like a gun. Gabar then wonders why Ludwig Bauer was fired from the University of Leipzig in 1964, June 2nd to be exact. Bauer says this is why, and he holds up his whiskey glass. It gets a little dry and whatever he said, it was unintelligible. Anyway, he's a drunk. But he doesn't like vodka, which means maybe something about Russia, not sure. But he says that's not the kind of information one likes to put on an application. And then a shot is fired into the club.
It was the man who was looking through the window. The shot hits Bauer's drink, and the man runs off. Gabar raises his gun and says, "Wait here," and goes after him. Now a belly dancer is performing, and the woman who had been singing earlier joins Bauer at his table.
Yeah, he didn't go anywhere. She says that she saw him come in with Captain Gabar. He says his name is Ludwig Bauer, and she introduces herself as Hafiz, I believe, and then they continue to enjoy the belly dancing. Captain Gabar comes back in the club, but doesn't sit down quite yet. Bauer tells Miss Hafiz that her voice sounds familiar. Gabar then does sit down and says Miss Hafiz is one of our most popular singers, although at this point we know that she's probably the voice on that record. Gabar says the man got away, but that tomorrow he'll be protected. Gabar will drive him to his new job himself.
So the next day, Gabar escorts Bauer to his new job. They go through security and check in at the front desk where the receptionist announced Gabar and the new man. They go to Professor Schlieben's office and meet him. Schlieben greets Gabar and is introduced to Bauer. And Bauer tells Schlieben he brings regards from his daughter. Schlieben deduces that they must have arrived on the same flight, and how did he like her? Fascinating, says Bauer. She's under the impression you're working at the university. Schlieben says something about Helga's enthusiasm for something.
And that it's too dangerous for her to be where he is now, some sort of laboratory. Now Schlieben takes Gabar and Bauer to the lab. They have to drive to this facility, though, and we see armed soldiers manning large guns outside a barbed wire fence surrounding a building.
As they approach the building, Schlieben explains that the door only opens by retinal scan, but he really dumbs down the explanation for Bauer. They go inside, and there are rockets there.
2 of them, and they're both named Hyksos. Many techs are milling about working on this or that. Gabar says that nobody's allowed in here but, and then he names off a dozen or so people, plus the 2 of them, I assume. They go back and meet one of the other people allowed in there, Hans Klugg, though Bauer has already met him, as we know.
Han explains to Schlieben that they met at the airport, but he didn't realize that this was the man who was replacing the scientist who had been killed. Then Schlieben and Hans take Bauer to see the control panel, which looks like a big map.
And some of the cities are lit up, like Tel Aviv, and there's a perimeter marked around all of them, and one tech is manning that board. Then Schlieben takes him to a drafting table, where he developed his Hyksos. Bauer questions this, but Gabar helpfully interjects that we call it Operation Hyksos, which explains everything, but not really. And then Hyksos, Schlieben patronizingly explains, are 17th dynasty shepherd kings, and now no one knows where they came from.
Bauer looks at the rockets and asks if anyone knows where they're going. To the moon, of course, says Gabar. Schlieben says in 3 months it will fly. He plans to add some atomic warheads, just in case, I guess, so the great powers of the West and the East will be begging him to work with them.
I think that was the plan all along, though, is to put warheads on them. Why does a moon rocket need a warhead is a question that nobody asks.
And then he says once Bauer has put in some time there and proven himself capable, he may be chosen to work there himself. Then Hans presents Bauer with his permanent pass. Then Hans instructs him to report back at the reception desk, and from there he'll be escorted to his new quarters, and he has Dr. Hyder accompany him.
Once Bauer's out of earshot, Schlieben says that Bauer seems like a likable chap. Hans says he doesn't like him, and Gabar says he's just not sure about him, so there's no consensus on Bauer's likability. Hyder and Bauer go to reception. There are 2 large packages there. Hyder takes the one on top of the other one, and the receptionist says that Bauer is in room 41. Hyder says that, well, we'll be neighbors, so you can follow me.
When Bauer goes to his room, he sees that his suitcase and briefcase are already there. He opens the briefcase and looks through his papers. Then he whistles and goes over to the curtain. He starts playing with the pull, like a cat, when the sound of an explosion occurs. Bauer runs out into the hall to see that Hyder's room next door now has a big hole in the wall.
And there's smoke and brown paper everywhere. Looks like that package exploded. Bauer runs off, not to get help, but to the reception desk. Hans is there collecting the other package for Dr. Schlieben, but Bauer wrestles it away, saying that Hyder opened his package and now he's lying upstairs in his own blood, which isn't really descriptive of what actually happened. He runs the package out to the courtyard and gingerly opens it while onlookers gather nearby. Way too close.
He tells everyone to back away, and then he starts cutting at the package. And then we cut to Gabar congratulating Bauer on dismantling the bomb. They are celebrating with drinks, and Gabar tells Bauer that he is to invite him to a soiree that evening that Schlieben is holding for his daughter, and Gabar will pick him up tonight to take him there.
Bauer says that he hopes that Gabar is not into Helga, but Gabar says that he has his own girl, Miss Haviz. Now at Schlieben's villa, the professor is commanding an audience. He's delighting them with his tale of something or other. Then Helga and Hans arrive, and Bauer asks Gabar if she's always with him. Gabar says that he's her fiancé, so yeah.
Professor Schlieben greets his daughter, saying she looks wonderful, and Helga tells him to quiet down, that his voice sounds like the mating call of a moose. And she runs off. Schlieben laughs and follows her, leaving Hans standing alone.
Helga runs to Bauer and says that she's happy to see him, but don't ask her why. He reeks of alcohol. Again. He says that that's part of his charm, and then she hugs him in a very flirtatious, not very engaged way. I think Hans is right not to like him. Bauer says that everyone is staring at them, and when we turn around, yeah, everyone is staring at them, even though Bauer and Helga are outside, standing basically in the water, and they're inside, so there's apparently no wall separating the home from the sea.
Hans is staring too, but he is also outside. He chugs his drink. Helga laughs and turns back to Bauer, and she asks, hey, how about a bathing suit? She's in the mood for a swim. Bauer says she's crazy, and what about her fiancé? And she asks, what about him? And she says that she'll be right back.
We do see Hans drinking alone at the bar, looking very dejected. Then Miss Haviz arrives, and she and Gabar kiss. Bauer joins the couple and tells Haviz that he likes her singing. And does she ever record? She tells Bauer that he can find her records anywhere. And then she spots a swimmer out in the water, which is apparently not very far away.
Bauer looks out and says, yes, crazy, isn't it? And then he excuses himself. He goes down to the beach, and then Helga comes up from the surf.
He's still in his tux, but he's carrying a towel.
They fall to the ground together, kissing, and after some time, they're ready for conversation.
Under the bright floodlights illuminating the beach in full view of everyone, surrounded by barbed wire and soldiers on the other side of it, they start making small talk. Bauer says that this place isn't conducive to romance, pointing to the armed guards nearby. Helga asks why they're there, and Bauer says they're protecting us. After all, we work for them. Helga asks if he's trying to say her father's working for the Egyptian army. Bauer says, as if you didn't know, but she insists that she didn't.
Bauer then asks if she's heard of the Hyksos, surface-to-surface missiles. And as they're talking, we see a guy in a scuba suit sneak up behind one of the armed guards. The scuba dude removes his mask, and we recognize him as the guy from Bauer's room his first night in Cairo.
Also, the previous night. Helga asks what Bauer does here, but he shushes her. He asks if she heard something and points to where that soldier used to be. He runs to the beach where he finds a dead soldier floating in the water. He sees a scuba diver off to his left among the rocks, and then suit and all, he follows him.
The stranger comes up by the house and places a bomb on a window.
Like it was a stick-up air freshener.
Bauer comes up the stairway and yells for Schlieben to get out of there. Helga comes up behind Bauer, and he covers her as the bomb goes off. Helga calls out Father, and Schlieben calls out Helga. The two are safe and they embrace. Schlieben, by the way, is now in his bathrobe, so the party must be over now.
They were rolling around on the beach for a really long time.
Or maybe he was going to go swimming too.
In his bathrobe? He's wearing his jammies. The next day, lunch is being served at Kessel Schlieben. Professor Schlieben is trying to justify making an atomic bomb for Egypt. Schlieben says that Egypt is too backwards to do it themselves. And anyway, everyone is doing it, so why not help this country? Helga says, let somebody else do it. After all, we're German. But Schlieben says that the race is on. US versus Russia, Russia versus China, Egypt versus Israel, and this is a race that he's got to win. Helga is still not happy, but her dad just calls her an irrational schoolgirl. He says that this is the age of nuclear physics, and makes Bauer agree with him. She tells her dad that they're going back to Germany, but Schlieben doesn't entertain this for a second. And then Gabar arrives. He says that 2 near assassinations in 24 hours is a lot.
Asks him how he likes his room. Schlieben seems to really enjoy being the target of assassination attempts.
I think he thinks it's flattering.
But in a more serious tone, he tells Gabar that Gabar needs Schlieben more than Schlieben needs Gabar, but he does ask for protection for his daughter Helga. Gabar advises him to just send her back home, and Schlieben says that he might just do that.
We should note that at this point, Helga has left the conversation, so she doesn't hear any of this.
But now he must get back to work. Whoever is trying to kill him still has 3 months to do so, but if he doesn't keep working, they could fall behind schedule, giving them even more time to kill him.
Later, at the record store, Bauer is listening to another message. The voice says that she submitted his last report. 3 months is a short time. They want him to get the photos of the Hyksos plans immediately, like within the next 24 hours. They'll have to break into the building tonight somehow. The voice says he'll need equipment. And then we cut to the man in the fez at the counter whistling. The voice goes on. She says, Ali at the counter, now we know his name, will sell you a record player. Inside is a camera and everything else you'll need. Then she says, good luck, Mike. So now we know his name is Mike. We haven't heard that before.
So Mike, the man formerly known as Ludwig Bauer, goes to Ali and tells him he didn't like this record at all. He breaks it on the table, apologizes, and reiterates that he didn't like it anyway. But what he really needs is a record player, something not too expensive. And Ali knows just what he needs and brings out a record player, saying that this is a very good one.
Back in his room, Mike is playing a record on that player, but after a little bit, he starts opening compartments on it. First, he takes off the tone arm, that's the camera, and packed inside the record player case is a thin coil of rope and some grappling hooks.
So now Mike is sneaking off to break into the Hyksos lab. He sneaks past guards and gets through the electric fence. He takes on a guard at an outpost by throwing a rock to distract him and then strangling him with fishing line.
Now he takes that same rope, attaches the grappling hooks, and starts throwing it across the gap between where he is and where he needs to be. He finally catches it on a pipe and then goes hand over hand and foot over foot, shimmying across it to get to the other side.
So he shimmies across the rope to the next guard post, and there he quietly takes care of this guard too,
slitting the throat of another inconvenient guard.
He then makes his way to the roof and uses a blowtorch to burn a hole in it.
It's padlocked from the inside, so he just burns a hole around the padlock. Once removed, he goes in. He's actually at the top of the missile silo now. He walks down a steep staircase that surrounds the missiles and gets down to the first floor and goes to the drafting table. First, he starts snapping photos of the calculations on the chalkboard, and then he pulls out the schematics, taking picture after picture. We hear the music build and build and build, and then it stops. And then Hans enters behind him. He's armed, and he tells Bauer not to move.
He then says that Bauer will get better results if he had more light, so he switches on the light and tells Bauer to put down the camera. Bauer obeys, and as he's bringing his hand back, he grabs a notebook that was sitting on the table, and Mike swings around and hurls it at Hans.
Mike leaps on Hans, and the two struggle for the gun. Some shots go off, and they hit the innards of a rocket. Mike slaps the gun away from Hans, but then we hear the rocket bits exploding. The fight continues. Mike pushes Hans down from the platform he's standing on. Hans lands near the gun, but Mike pushes it away from him. But Hans gets the better of Mike and tries to choke him.
Then we cut outside where the guards are reporting the sounds of explosions coming from inside the compound. Back inside, Mike is now on top and pounding on Hans's gut until Hans falls into a state of unconsciousness. Then Mike sets fire to the plans he had been photographing as sirens start to wail. And back outside, Captain Gabar has arrived to take charge of the situation.
Hans starts to stir as a rockets snap, crackle, and pop. Outside, Gabar has arrived, so maybe the guards can enter the lab? But not quite yet. Mike throws a chair through the control panel map thing, shattering only half of it.
Hans, now fully conscious, picks up the gun and gives chase. As Mike, aka Bauer, is racing up the stairs to the hole he had cut in the ceiling, Hans gets a few shots off at him, but they don't do anything besides make a lot of noise, and he has expended the last of his bullets. Mike makes it to his hole and climbs up just as Hans reaches him, but Hans can't make it, and he falls screaming to his death.
And lands with a sickening thud. Outside, Gabar and the soldiers exchange information, but without subtitles, we don't know what they're saying. While they're talking, Miss Haviz, the singer from the nightclub, rushes up. She's dressed in a tea dress in a flattering coral color with a matching clutch. She asks what happened, but Gabar ignores her and calls Schlieben. Now Mike needs to get out without being seen. There's a lot of people around that weren't around before. Schlieben arrives, and he and Gabar finally go into the building.
As they're headed to the building, Mike is shimmying overhead on his rope, and the camera that he had falls away from him, just as Miss Hafiz is passing by. She bends down to pick it up and looks up and sees Mike hanging from the wire, and she quietly pockets the camera.
Mike has seen her too. Schlieben asks Gabar to get Bauer, but Miss Hafiz volunteers to do it, which is not suspicious at all. Gabar tells her to call Bauer's room. Outside, Mike has found a duffel bag and pulls out his green rubber work smock and puts it on. Inside, Gabar is making a phone call, And back outside, Miss Aviz bumps into the now smocked Bauer/Mike, and she murmurs, "Come quick."
You go back to where Gabar and Professor Schlieben are waiting, and the professor rushes Bauer/Mike inside. Schlieben says that Hans Klugg is dead, and that the Hyksos is a disaster, an absolute disaster.
They'll have to start from scratch, and it will now be a year before they will be ready. But Schlieben says he'll do it in 7 months. He's not going to let those homicidal maniacs intimidate him. He obviously is blaming Israel for this attack. He says 7 months, no, 6, and then he goes to his car. He tells Bauer that he'll have to help him work night and day. The plans are destroyed, but not the brain, he says. Mike and Gabar just look at each other as he drives off.
And then we're back at the nightclub with more belly dancing.
Yay.
And Safis is going up to her dressing room where Mike is waiting. As she walks in, he says, "Hello, Yasmin." And she's startled, and Mike sees that she recognizes the name and says, "So you are Yasmin. Where's my camera?"
She says that he should not have come. It's too dangerous. She gives him the camera back, but she says Ali would have gotten it to him in time to leave. He says, "Leave? Is she crazy? They're rebuilding Hyksos. I can't leave now." But she has news. The real Ludwig Bauer has been found. The Germans have him, and he'll soon be put on trial. This should be a short trial, but it will be all over the newspapers, thus blowing his cover.
They expected this, but not for the real Bauer to be put on a public trial. So Mike is to be picked up at midnight and escorted to the airport.
They're going to pick him up at the villa, and Mike asks, "What about Schlieben?" Yasmin doesn't know. You can't talk to Schlieben. She asks if there's anything that he holds sacred, and Mike says yes, his daughter Helga. Why didn't he think of that before? He and Yasmin say goodbye. He tells Yasmin that she's 100% professional, then he ruins the compliment by adding that it's very unbecoming in such a lovely girl.
He gets down there just as Gabar arrives. Gabar has had a very stressful day, and Yasmin is trying to get him to relax. Gabar asks where she found Bauer when she went to fetch him that evening, and she tells him by the gate he had just arrived in a jeep. But Gabar is not convinced. He feels Bauer had something to do with this. Yasmin tries to distract him, and it's working, until the phone rings.
Whatever he hears over the phone makes him very angry. He tells the caller to block the roads and to be careful. He must know that we're after him, Bauer that is, but he wants him alive at all costs. Gabar says that Bauer used to spend the nights at Schlieben's villa. Did he used to? Because he's only been there for 2.5 days. Anyway, Gabar gets dressed and says he's going to get the man he was looking for. Yasmin shouts, Who? But he doesn't answer before he leaves.
Yasmin immediately picks up the phone and calls Professor Schlieben. She asks to speak with Bauer, but he tells her that he's unavailable and that he and Helga have gone down to the beach for a moonlight sail.
Well, at least that's what he said, haha. It is spring, you know.
And I'm sure she needed consoling after the death of her fiancé just a couple hours ago.
But when we see Helga and Mike, they are sitting in a boat that's gently rocking. It's tied to the pier or whatever. Mike/Bauer asks Helga if, after what happened today, she and her dad will go back to Germany. Helga says not a chance. He enjoys being a target. Then she asks what's keeping Bauer here. The money? She tells him that he should go. He then offers her a calming drink, which, even though she doesn't drink, she accepts. But to her surprise, Bauer doesn't join her, and we soon find out why. He roofied her. She passes out in the boat. Then he lights a signal beacon and shines it out to sea. At this, a submarine emerges from under the sea, and Mike turns the boat on and drives out towards it.
When he reaches the submarine, he has the submarine crew take Helga on board, and he speeds off as the sub resubmerges.
Now we're back at the Schlieben home. Gabar is in Schlieben's office. He's making another call. Again, he's not happy with the results of it. Schlieben asks him to go look for Helga, and he stomps off. Mike, who's just outside the window, climbs into the room once Gabar is gone. He tells Schlieben he can tell him where Helga is. She's on a submarine, and she's probably halfway to Tel Aviv by now. Schlieben is gobsmacked by this. Mike asks Schlieben to come with him. He could reunite him with his daughter in a couple of hours. It's the best outcome for all concerned.
But Schlieben isn't buying it. Bauer had ruined Schlieben's life's work, kidnapped his daughter, now wants him to leave with him. Schlieben isn't having any of this. He sounds an alarm, and Mike leaves to the window from whence he came.
And that's good, too, because someone is firing shots at him. Gabar, maybe? Later, somehow, Mike gets a ride into town with some trucker. Once there, he breaks into the record store. But surprise, Gabar is there already, gun drawn. He tells Bauer he came there one time too many. To the record store, that is. Mike asks whether he doesn't just shoot him now, but Gabar wants to catch Mike's contact as well. Might as well catch the whole spy syndicate at one time. The army is organized quite well, too.
And this is confirmed to us by showing us several soldiers outside with guns drawn. Mike asks if he might have a cigarette, and Gabar tells him not to move. Then Gabar asks if Helga is on a submarine, and Mike tells him of course.
From another doorway, we see Yasmin sneaking in. She also has a gun. She comes into view of everyone and tells Gabar to drop his gun. He says, "You?" Gabar calls her a bitch and shoots her in the gut. Then Mike shoots Gabar, but only in the shoulder.
Mike goes to the falling Yasmin and asks why she didn't shoot, and with her dying words, she says she couldn't. She just couldn't.
But it looks like the shots were the signal for the army to start shooting into the record store. The window breaks, and Mike skedaddles. He looks outside, but the streets are blockaded. They're full of army men. So he takes to the roofs. The armies chase him as night turns to day, and then back to night, and then to day again. It's a bad effect.
As the chase goes on, Mike runs down an alley, and around a corner he's grabbed and his mouth is covered by Ali. As the soldiers who are chasing him run past, Ali leads Mike to safety. Mike then disguises himself with a tablecloth to wear over his head.
We don't see where he got it from. It's now fully day, and they're in a cafe. The cafe owner turns up the radio for them. Apparently, the news, which is in Egyptian, is all about Mike. Then our favorite assassin comes into the cafe. He's there for a moment, then he leaves. Mike recognizes him and follows him.
Mike follows the bomb thrower to a mosque. As he enters, Mike is directed to remove his shoes before entering. Then he goes in and sits down next to the bomb thrower. Mike says that he needs his help. The bomb thrower looks at him like he's nuts. Then everyone backs away from him, then moves back again toward him. They surround him, and when they back away again, Mike is unconscious on the ground.
When he wakes up, he's surrounded by a group of men, and they have questions. When will Schlieben be ready again? Mike confesses that he's not Bauer. He's not even German. He came there of his own accord to ask for help. He brags that he trashed those nuclear weapons a couple days ago. Surely you've heard about it on the radio. And then the man, who I think might be the imam of the mosque, is handed a newspaper. And though we can't read the text, it's hard to miss the 8x10 glossy filling up a quarter of the page. The man turns to Mike and asks, "So you're an Israeli spy?" Mike says, "We want the same things." He asks who they are, and they are the Holy Islam Freedom Fighters. They're trying to stop violence in the Middle East. He and his outfit provided them cover, and they thank him for that. The man says, "Peace be upon your soul," and Mike says, "My soul?"
The man says that Mike is indeed a friend, and as such, he should die peacefully like a friend.
The man says that they hate Arab dictators, German scientists, and Israeli spies. Mike protests that he's an American. Duh. But the man says that they hate Americans most of all. He tells the men to take him upstairs. He says Mike will have a sweet and painless death. Mike says, "Allah be praised."
So the freedom fighters take Mike outside for his execution. He asks if he might have his shoes so that he can die with dignity, and they oblige. They line him up against a wall. He's offered a covering for his eyes, but Mike, seeing that they're such good friends, turns it down. But he would like a cigarette. He's given a cigarette, which he lights and fumbles, and it falls to the ground. He bends over to pick it up, pausing to light the wick in his shoe. The what?
His shoelace is a wick.
He then throws his shoe in the middle of the firing squad, which explodes, and they all fall dead. Mike runs back to the mosque to grab another pair of shoes, then back to the cafe to grab Ali, who is dragged away without being able to finish his drink.
Then we see that they have stolen a cart full of fruit and another tablecloth, which Mike has fashioned into a makeshift burqa. They start moving. They come across some guards, and Ali distracts them as Mike takes the horse from the cart and rides it to the beach. The motorcycle cops get tired of Ali, and they chase Mike. They also go to the beach, and there's a protracted scene where the motorcycle cops are circling around the poor horse, scaring it to death. Mike gets off the horse and hides behind a sand dune. I don't have who he's bringing the news to, but I have it. Later, Gabar brings Schlieben news of Helga. She's in Rome, and she's cooperating with them. Them? Don't know who they are. And now we get a short Roman holiday. We see a few of the sights. Mike meets Gabar there, and they chat about his shoulder wound. Mike says that he meant to do that. They also chat about Yasmin, R.I.P.
Mike asks if Schlieben is in Rome, and Gabar says he is, and Mike says that Helga is there too. But they can't meet here. This bistro is too crowded. So I guess they agree to meet at some ruins 24 kilometers outside of the city limits.
They're at some deserted ruins on the shore. Father and daughter reunite. Helga wants to go home, but Schlieben says no, they're going back. They ask to talk alone, and they go off, leading Mike and Gabar to trade cigarettes. Helga and Schlieben bicker about Schlieben's work. Helga is convinced that he'll be killed. They will have to kill him. Schlieben says he's going to honor his contract, no matter what happens. Then the ruins get a little less deserted as a group of tourists enter the arena. Helga complains that by doing this, she's also in danger, and anyway, what he's doing is wrong.
Helga then goes to Mike and tells him that her father is not coming with them, and Schlieben goes to Gabar and tells him that he won't be returning with him. He says he's been beaten by his own daughter. He's lost her once, and he's not going to let it happen again. Then some of those tourists pass by as Gabar snaps his fingers and says, "Grab them!" Some of these tourists weren't tourists at all. They take Schlieben and Helga and Mike, but a shot rings out.
There's a man standing up on a higher level of the ruins. He shouts, "Don't anybody move." Turning around, everyone sees that Mike is pointing his gun at Schlieben, and one of the thugs has a knife at Helga's throat. Gabar says he can't control him. They threaten to cut Helga's throat, but ultimately, the two factions take their respective captives away separately.
That night, Mike has traced them back to the Egyptian embassy where they are holding Helga. He goes inside, and he can hear in the other room Gabar tell Helga that if her father loves her, he will follow her to Egypt.
Mike bursts into the room. He grabs a gun from the desk, and now he's holding two guns on the men. He tells them to let Helga go, and they do. But while he's looking at the men, guns drawn, Gabar comes from outside, clobbering him from behind. That knocks him out.
Gabar instructs his men to put Mike in the titular trunk to Cairo.
Yeah, we finally have a title. He doesn't want him killed. There's a lot that he can tell them. Once Mike is in the trunk, they load it into a van to be driven to the airport.
Now wacky music plays as the trunk is being brought to the airport. Some American agents, including the guy who was at the ruins with the gun, comments that Mike got Helga out of Egypt. He'll surely be able to get her out of the Egyptian embassy.
Now we're back in the van with Mike in the trunk. We saw him earlier using a blowtorch to remove the locks, just as he did with that trapdoor. Inside the van, he opens the trunk, swings the lid up, which conks the guard in the head.
Then we cut away to the van with trunk inside, arriving at the airport. The American agents see the trunk and notice that it has a diplomatic seal on it and it can't be opened, but it certainly does look suspicious. Then there's a bit of business where they stop the trunk from being loaded onto the plane. Some Italian is spoken, some papers are passed around, and eventually they do open the trunk, and it's revealed that there's a man inside, and it's not Mike, and this man is bound and gagged.
It's Mahmoud. I guess he took Mike's place somewhere in the van. Where's Mike, they ask. Elsewhere in the airport, Helga is being bustled onto a plane to Cairo by Gabar. They choose their seats, and as it turns out, Mike is in the seat behind them. He reaches forward to their row. He grabs Gabar's gun off his seat. Then he stands up so Helga can see him. He greets Gabar. He holds the paper in front of his face and conks him on the head with the gun, knocking him out. With Gabar safely out of commission, Helga and Mike go to the flight attendant to let them off the plane. They got on the wrong one. They're supposed to go to Madrid, not Cairo. And back in 1965, this actually would work. They exit the plane to the delight of Professor Schlieben and everyone else. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Trunk to Cairo from 1965.
Trunk to Cairo was shot at the Spandau Studios in Berlin and on location in Rome and Israel from June to July 1965. The film's title was inspired by the 1964 discovery at Rome Airport of a bound and drugged man inside of a trunk, sent from the Egyptian embassy at Rome to Cairo, marked diplomatic mail.
Hopefully there was something more to that story. Filming took place in a gamut of intriguing locales, according to an AIP press flag, including the mysterious streets of Cairo, the sinister hideaway of Egypt's holy freedom fighters, the great sandy wastes of the Sphinx and pyramids, and the ancient Colosseum of Rome. Most of that we didn't see. This film was originally meant to star Stephen Boyd and Senta Berger, but obviously that was changed.
The film's score was by Dov Seltzer and featured a song Dangerous Woman, written by Gene Raskin and sung by Oela Gill.
Texas-born Audie Murphy is celebrated as the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. He received every military combat award, including the Medal of Honor, having, at age 19, held off by himself an entire company of German soldiers for an hour, then while wounded, leading a successful counterattack.
After the war, Murphy was featured on the cover of Life magazine for his courageous service. he was taken under the wing of movie star James Cagney, and from the late 40s until his tragic death in 1971 in a plane crash, Murphy was a movie star.
His career started in 1948, and in 1955 he played himself in a film based on his memoirs from the war called To Hell and Back. But Murphy was mainly known for appearing in westerns until he fulfilled his contract with Universal International. According to the New Mexico Historical Review, which published a treatise on Murphy's life and work, once free from that obligation, quote, where he had felt confined to repetitious westerns, Murphy's work for other studios was decidedly inferior and included only one non-western, a cliched spy thriller called Trunk to Cairo.
Murphy returned to westerns after Trunk to Cairo, appearing in Gunpoint in 1966. Murphy and the rest of the actors mostly performed their own stunts in the movie, as there weren't any skilled Hollywood stuntmen on location for the film, making this film rougher than westerns, according to an AIP press article.
George Sanders, supposedly, according to the AIP press book, realized a lifetime dream of becoming a scientist by appearing in this film. Sanders graduated with a technical degree and worked as a textile researcher until the stock market crash of 1929 sidelined his science career, and instead put him on a path to movie stardom.
The same press book touts Marianne Koch as a new Teutonic film beauty, joining the likes of Marlene Dietrich and Lily Palmer. Koch, a, quote, striking brunette of eye-catching measurements, unquote, made her American debut in Trunk to Cairo. The article confidently and perhaps mendaciously stated that it had been predicted by European critics and Hollywood journalists that the actress will attain similar popularity and eventual stardom as was accorded Dietrich and Palmer. Koch had already appeared in the spaghetti western of A Fistful of Dollars, but did not go on to make more American films.
And you may know Menahem Golan, who, along with his longtime partner and cousin, Yoram Globus, founded the Canon Group. The studio specialized in low-budget genre films and had its heyday in the 1980s.
Screenwriter Marc Behm also wrote Charade, which starred Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, and Help, which starred the Beatles.
This film was released in 1965 in Israel, but debuted in the States on December 28, 1966. AIP paired this film with War Italian style in many markets.
The German title of the film is Einer spielt falsch, which translates to One Plays Wrong.
This film had but one tagline, and it is this: what was in it? Big enough for a body, heavy enough for a bomb. Did it hold a nation's fate? Where did it come from, and who knows its deadly secret?
The press book for Trunk to Cairo recommended that theater owners place a trunk in the lobby with a pretty girl in Far East costume and have her give keys to viewers as they enter the theater. Upon opening the trunk, patrons could choose from among the enclosed sealed envelopes containing gift certificates from local merchants.
They also recommended a tie-in with travel agencies, supplying them with materials from the film that featured thrilling scenes from Cairo and the Far East. They even suggested making up movie display signs and asking airlines and airport officials who, quote, should permit, end quote, the posting of materials at the airport and ticket offices. Don't think that would ever happen now.
Also suggested was a tie-in with local camera shops due to the importance of the miniature camera used in the film.
The New York Times offered a terse review of Trunk to Cairo, which there was on a double bill with Arrivederci Baby. The reviewer said, Arrivederci Baby, quote, is so genuinely funny and sassy that it's easy to forgive a dismal little clunker called Trunk to Cairo, attached to yesterday's new double bill on the circuits. Audie Murphy, George Sanders, and Marianne Koch are the doomed ones. Skip it, baby. And the New York Daily News gave it 2.5 stars. Couldn't find any more reviews, though.
Trunk to Cairo did not feature a lot of recurring players from other AIP product, though Hans von Borsody, who played Hans Klugg, had previously appeared in Commando in 1962.
And George Sanders would appear in The Girl for Rio, which is the AIP-produced sequel to The Million Eyes of Sumeru. But upon completion, AIP disowned the movie and declined to release it. All right, Jeff, that's all we could find out about Trunk to Cairo. There's not a whole lot of information out there. So let's fill the rest of the time with our thoughts on the movie. Using our scale of AIP, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic, how would you rate Trunk to Cairo, and tell us why?
Well, Trunk to Cairo is not a bad movie, but it certainly has a lot going against it. I think the number one issue with this film is the accents. Everyone in this film has an accent, and not necessarily an accent from the location where the character allegedly hails from. We have George Sanders, whose accent sounds decidedly British as the German scientist Professor Schlieben, and of course Audie Murphy with his aw shucks Texas drawl going undercover as another German scientist. And nobody ever suspects that he might be otherwise, despite his accent. To me, it was reminiscent of Jack Nicholson and his weary, disillusioned French soldier from The Terror. But besides these inconsistencies, we also have the problem of trying to cut through the accents just to be able to keep track of what's going on. And to make things even more complicated, the two female leads, Marianne, who played Helga, and Gila Almagor, who played Yasmin, look virtually identical. And while each has their own distinct and, in this case, correct accent, they both sounded exotic to my untrained ears, and it was just difficult to tell them apart. Another negative is the amount of day for night shots that appear in the film, and none of them are done well. Some chase scenes appear to be taking place over the course of a couple of days if we were to go by the position of the sun in the sky. And Trunks of Cairo can come off as a bit racist, and that appears to stem from the political climate in the Middle East at the time the film was made. And one last strike against Trunks of Cairo is the score. It's pretty weird. Most of it consists of music that sounds indigenous to the location, which is fine. But the last 15 minutes or so, once Mike and Ali are on the run and enlist the help of a horse-drawn cart, well, one review I read likened the score to that of a Looney Tunes cartoon. And yeah, it kind of does resemble that.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this new musical trend stays with us for the duration of the film, including the whole Trunks of Cairo sequence, the contents of which the poster doubled down on a mystery that was never really developed. As we said, the tagline was, "What was in it? Big enough for a body, heavy enough for a bomb? Did it hold a nation's future or another's fate? Where did it come from? And who knows its deadly secret?" The actual contents of the trunk weren't all that exciting.
Nope.
But if one can cut through all that, and that is a lot to cut through, there is a pretty decent story tucked away in here. I liked the business with the record store, and also liked Mike trying to get Yasmin to reveal her identity, although I'm not sure that was such a smart move on his part. But there's also an inherent weirdness factor at play here. And a weirdness factor would oftentimes get a boosted rating from me, but this time it's just a little too out there for me to appreciate it. And I didn't buy Audie Murphy as Sean Connery as James Bond. And that's really what Trunks of Cairo is built on. I think that maybe if we had been introduced to his character as Mike Merrick at the beginning, it would have given this a little more to work with. But we only know him as Ludwig Bauer, and he's so obviously not a Ludwig Bauer. During the first half of the film, I don't know when we were supposed to realize he's a secret agent. I mean, it's pretty early on. He gets the record, so he's getting orders. I think it could have been presented a little more clearly. So this movie gets a solid I from me. What do you think, Cheryl?
Well, like you and everybody else in the world who saw this movie, it is glaringly obvious that Audie Murphy was miscast. And as you mentioned, he's passing for a German scientist working for or with the Israeli Mossad, but his accent is 100% from the Deep South. And about 15 minutes before the movie ends, there's this, I guess, big reveal that he's really American. Oh, really? Oh, wow, I had no idea. I can't believe that nobody knew. I know everyone in this movie spoke English at least most of the time, but they also used their native accents, or nearby. At least Sanders was European, if not actually German, so it didn't seem so out of place. But Murphy's Texas twang is such a dead giveaway that I have to suspect that every character in the film was just humoring him, because the only other alternative is that they are all monumentally stupid. Murphy also has a very slight build and is actually a good deal shorter than most of the male characters, and that makes the fight scenes look really unbalanced. And indeed, some of the people who attack Mike Merrick, if that is his real name, do almost get the better of him, or would have if not for some third party who intervenes, giving Merrick time to recover. But the script does call for Mike to win a few hand-to-hand combat situations, and that just doesn't look realistic. But I will say that the scenes of Mike on horseback on the beach looked entirely natural. So that just leaves the other actors and the plot. George Sanders has the next largest role as the verging on mad scientist Professor Schlieben. He is believable as an egotistical genius who takes great pleasure in being the target of assassination attempts. I think he does his best with the material, but as I said before, it's really hard to suspend disbelief when a so-called brilliant physicist hires a Texan believing he's really a German. Helga and Yasmin seem to be interchangeable characters, not the least because they look very much alike. There was one point when we were taking notes where we had to go back and rewrite them because we thought Helga was in a scene and it was really Yasmin. Helga's character was really underdeveloped. Her role seemed to be a silly young woman who flirts with other men in front of her fiancé. Although I think we're supposed to believe that Mike Merrick just has so much magnetism, she couldn't help herself. Hard to believe, though. And Helga was really just there as a plot device used to get the men to do something they didn't want to do in order to save her. Yasmin's character was on screen very briefly, but she had a lot more going on than Helga did. As a secret Israeli operative or whatever, we don't get to see much of her as that, though. She gets a lot more time as Miss Hafiz, the nightclub singer and girlfriend of Gabar. I would have liked to see more of her and what her role was. I wouldn't call this plot confusing, but I don't think the writers, all three of them, connected the dots very much when it came to spelling out who worked for which agency and what each agency was doing there. And it didn't help that Merrick and Yasmin spent the better part of the movie going by other names. Only by watching it slowly, as we do for this podcast, gave us the time we needed to sort out who they really were. At its base, it's a pretty standard issue spy movie without a whole lot of extras. The locations may sound exotic, Cairo, Rome, but they're not. Most of the filming took place away from the tourist-friendly locations, barring one scene in a crumbling Roman ruin. AIP promised we'd see the pyramids and the Sphinx. We did not. And like you said, going with the music that accompanied the ending sequence of the film, it's just totally different from the rest of the movie. It's very slapstick and looks like it was even meant to elicit some laughs, but it didn't. It's not really funny. But overall, the movie is mildly entertaining sometimes. And if you really like Audie Murphy in movies where he does what he's good at, shooting bad guys and riding horses, you may want to track this one down just to compare and contrast. But if not, you can skip it. You're not really missing much. Trunk to Cairo is not good, but it's also not bad. It's just solidly okay. And like you, I also give it an eye.
I think a lot of the difficulty we had in discussing this one is the consequence of the names. The character of Merrick is the main character, but we don't know who he is until halfway through. We know him as Ludwig Bauer.
And no one ever says Merrick. It's just in the credits.
I think that a sequence to establish the character as Merrick, like maybe accepting this mission at the beginning of the film, would have helped tremendously.
Don't Bond movies do that? We always know who's going in and what their cover is and what they're trying to do. And here, it just sort of started a little too far in without all that establishing information.
It opens with the German scientist being killed in the explosion by the Volkswagen. Next thing we know, the character of Mike, who we don't even know, is flying to Cairo.
Yeah, they left out a little bit there, and maybe they're just not used to writing spy dramas. But one of the writers wrote Charade and Help, which were a lot more narratively cohesive. Really no excuse.
And for better or for worse, we have a few more of these foreign-produced spy features to cover on the podcast. We've got Spy in Your Eye. We've got Secret Agent Fireball. So we'll be able to compare those to this and see if those movies are done any better or worse than Trunk to Cairo.
And we'll tell you all about it when that happens. But for now, I think we're going to wrap it up. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.